next to the fridge.
You guys ready to go?
Yeah, sure.
All right. All right, good evening. I'm going to call to order this regular board meeting, Wednesday, October 19th, 2022. Mr. Drew, your roll call, please.
Mrs. Eubank.
Here.
Mrs. Larimer.
Here.
Dr. Ruffert.
Here.
Mr. Pullman.
Here.
Mr. Bennington.
I'm here. And please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to start with our safety briefing. Perrysburg Schools welcomes you to the Commodore Building, and we thank you for attending tonight's Board of Education meeting. We care about the safety of our students, staff, families, and guests. Please note that there are exits on both the east and west sides of the cafeteria. In case of an emergency, an AED is located just outside the cafeteria doors. You are located at 140 East Indiana Avenue. Thank you for joining us tonight and supporting Perrysburg Schools. Next items, we have the agenda in front of us. I'm looking for a resolution or a motion to adopt the proposed agenda.
So move. We'll fight for it.
Ms. Larimer, motion, and Mr. Pullman, second. Roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes.
Dr. Ruffert.
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. Okay, now for the part of the agenda we always enjoy, we've got some recognitions to do tonight. Some guests are in the room. So Mr. Hostler, you want to lead us through it?
Sure, thank you. At this time, I'll introduce Mr. Scott Bucher, principal of Perrysburg Junior High, to share some information about one of his exceptional students and a great honor that he received earlier this year. So, Mr. Bucher.
All right. Thank you for having us to the Board of Education. Thank you for allowing me to present a eighth grade student, Dylan, our mayor, right, he's right over there. So Dylan, I don't know if you want to come up and join me right now.
Do it.
Yeah, of course he does. He's. I talked to him today and said, all right, I kind of briefed him what to expect. And I said, you have your speech ready today, right? And he kind of looked at me, you're just kidding, I'm just kidding. So Dylan is an eighth grader here at the junior high with us. And actually last year as a seventh grader, we do an annual like Geography B local within our building. And then Dylan was one of our winners in the Geography B, which qualified him to a regional Geography B, which he was one of the contestants to advance from the regional one, which then took him to a national competition in Orlando, Florida, where he placed high enough and qualified actually then for the International History Olympiad that took place in July in Princeton, New Jersey, with that. And, while Dylan was there, he actually placed 12th in the middle school division out of 51 participants at that International History Olympiad, and he was the only contestant from the state of Ohio in the middle school, junior high category there. So he is, when you talk about being the best of the best, in the area, in the state, that's Dylan right here, the best of the best with that. So we're really excited for Dylan, and because he placed at that test in the International Olympiad there, it also qualifies him for what's the next test that we're going to be taking here soon? Do you remember that one? No, there's another one that's coming up here soon. So we're excited for that, and talking to his mother there too, but the experience in New Jersey and New York, it just seemed like a tremendous environment and experience for Dylan. So we're really proud, really excited for him, and he's having a heck of an eighth grade year for us too. So.
Okay.
Future Jeopardy contestant, right?
Maybe. All right. Very good.
Well, we have a little certificate. We have a certificate for you. Mr. Pullman, would you like to present that to Dylan? I mean, that's just exceptional. Congratulations, and Mom. That's very exciting. You must be very proud.
Picture? Yeah.
Well, it should be by the flag.
Would have been nice to maybe do a challenge between Dylan and the board to see how they would have squared off.
No, let's
That
not.
would have been interesting.
Can we abstain?
I absolutely know who my money's on, and it
Can
is
we
not
say
on
no,
this
thank
board.
you?
I just took a civil service exam that embarrassed me to no end. So sixth grade math apparently was not my forte.
Well, again, well done, and thank you for representing Perrysburg Schools so well.
Yes, well done.
And the next item, the next recognition.
Sure. The next recognition right now is the fall. It's fall. It feels like fall, certainly when you step outside. And that means one thing in the theater department, time for our fall play. So we have some students that are here to talk a little bit about their production. While they're walking up there, it is going to be, I'll let them tell you what it is, but November 4th at 7 p.m. Opening night is on Friday, and repeat performance on the 5th, 6th at different times, and you can find out on the website how to purchase tickets. So it's looking forward to it. So welcome.
Hi, my name is Katie Kleberger, and I'm a junior at Perrysburg High School. I'm a member of the Perrysburg High School Drama Leadership Team, as well as a member of our fall play, Shakespeare in Love. And we are here today to invite you, as well as other supporters of Perrysburg Schools, to the show. So a little bit about my part in the show. Like I said, I'm a junior, and I play an actor named Peter. But in addition to that, I am the fight captain, so I keep everyone safe during our dangerous fight scenes, which is really exciting.
Hi, everybody. My name is Evan Boyers, and I'm currently a senior at the high school, so cherishing every last moment. And I play the character Fennyman in the show. A little bit about the show is it's based on the 1998 Best Picture winning movie, Shakespeare in Love, which is a romantic comedy that reimagines William Shakespeare's inspiration as he wrote Romeo and Juliet. And so my character Fennyman in it is as I say, the money. And so I'm providing money to help produce the show within Shakespeare in Love. I have a very energetic, fun character in it. And there's a lot of duality with him. He's very mean sometimes, but he's also very childish, so it's very cool. My favorite thing about being in the show is that there's a little bit of everything, really. There's comedy, there's romance, there's action, and all sorts of other stuff that makes it very appealing and fun to produce.
Hello, my name is Josh Kennedy. I'm a junior, and I'm on the drama club leadership team, as well as playing the role of Richard Burbage in Shakespeare in Love. A little bit about Burbage is he is the lead actor of the Chamberlain's Men in Shakespeare in Love, which means he is a very big actor all across Europe. He gets into fights a lot with a character named Ned Allen, who is the lead actor for Shakespeare. Something I really like about the show is that it's not all in Shakespearean language like you would think. It's actually a lot of the language we speak today, so you will be able to understand it, don't worry. And that's another reason of why you should come see the show is you don't need to be a Shakespeare nerd. You can just love to be entertained, and the show will be great for you.
Hi, I'm Dominic Navarro. I'm a sophomore at Perrysburg, and I play Ned Allen in Shakespeare in Love. Ned Allen is Shakespeare's lead actor, and not only is he a leader on the stage, but he proves to be a leader behind the scenes, where he helps put on the production during this time of madness. What I love about the show, or being in the show so much, is that all the action I get to partake in, but the community as well. I love being around these people. I'd like to show you guys our poster. Most importantly, we have our QR code for our tickets that you can find on every poster that we've posted around, and the link at perrysburgtheater.ludus.com. So, thank you guys.
Hello, my name is Claire Birkin. I am a senior, and in the show, I play the nurse, who is also referred to as Nursey, and I'm also the show's dramaturg. So as a nurse, I get to play a very maternal and caring character, who is the nurse to Viola de Lesseps. I try to give her somewhat motherly advice, as she does not always make the best decisions, nor is she very punctual all the time. And I also try to keep Lord Wessex in check, as he can be very impatient. A dramaturg is somebody who is an expert in the world of the play. So for this play, as Josh might put it, I am the Shakespeare nerd. So I am in charge of knowing all that I can about Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, the Elizabethan era in general, or knowing that like Richard Burbage and Ned Allen are real people and they were real rivals back in that time. And so that kind of leads me to my favorite part about the play, is that we try our very best to be as historically accurate as we can. My whole job as the dramaturg assures that, and I'm having a lot of fun doing it. We also had the chance to work with Dr. Gearhart from Bowling Green State University. She teaches Shakespeare or early modern English literature. So she helped us a lot to get into kind of the mindset of Shakespeare. Now, we've talked a lot about the show, but when is it? It is November 4th, 5th, and 6th. On Friday, November 4th, and Saturday, November 5th, it is at 7 p.m. And on Sunday, November 6th, it is at 2 p.m., all 3 shows at the Perrysburg High School Auditorium. Thank you so much for listening to us talk about our show. We would be delighted to have all of you and everybody who supports Perrysburg Schools to come see our show. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, if the performance is half as good as that presentation right there, the community's in for a treat. So,
Yes, exactly.
looking forward to it. Thank you, guys.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. This is now, I assume, are we okay dispensing with the 5-minute break?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay, thank you. Next is our first opportunity for public participation. This is going to be for agenda items only. So if there's items on here that we'll be presenting or voting on, you are free to comment on that during this session. We'll be limiting the total time to 15 minutes, 3 minutes per participant. If you have any materials, we ask that you provide them to an administrator in the back, and they will make sure that we get them. I don't have the sign-up list in front of me, but there are a lot of familiar faces in here today, so I'll just ask, is there anybody that would like to do public participation during this session? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, and Mr. President, we just wanted to go over kind of our monthly update, and we wanted to circle back. I know at the last presentation we threw out a lot of information on the state report card had just come out, and so we did talk about how the high school and the recognition that any of our schools get is really based on all the work that goes on prior to those students showing up at that building. So whether it's HPI, the junior high, the high school, all these students are really think of that iceberg, and you see the tip, and there's so much that goes on underneath. But with the high school, we wanted to take a moment to dig in, because it's one thing to say number 9 in the state out of 823 in terms of the performance index score, and you can see on the screen here, the other schools. But we wanted to kind of dig into this list a little bit further. So one of the things that we did is looking at the top 10 high schools. We looked at, of course, the performance index and being out of first place by less than 3 points. That's certainly where we stand right now. But we also did is we looked at how much each district spends per pupil, because how we use our dollars, utilize our resources to get these kind of results is something that we always want to be mindful of, and it drives a lot of what we do and what we talk about, finding that balance. And then we wanted to take a look at the size of the schools, because that's the school districts, because I think that's important. So the first thing I wanted to point out in this next slide is that of the 10 school districts that are represented in this top 10 list of highest performing high schools in the state, there are only 2 out of the 10 that the district spends less than what Perrysburg spends. And I'd like to point out that Versailles and Minster, their enrollment also, to put it in perspective, I know we have Mr. Bucher here, but I believe that the entire school district of Minster is about the same size as Perrysburg Junior High, if I'm not mistaken. So, okay. So it's a little smaller. So, and nothing to take away from that district, but in terms of the scale, Perrysburg, being, the size that we have, and of course for size. So those two districts are smaller districts, and their cost per pupil of what they're spending is less than ours. And you can see that the average for this whole list was $12,764 per pupil is what these districts are spending. And of course, we're almost $1,600, $1,500 below that average. And so I think that's important. Also, there's only one high school that's represented on this list that is actually larger, from a district that is larger than Perrysburg, and that is Walnut Hills, which is part of Cincinnati Public Schools. So when you stop and think about this in a little bit different way, it's pretty exciting that we have a district of the top, out of the 820-some high schools in the state. When you look at how the district spends per pupil to get those results, we're third from the bottom, which is great and well below the average. And when you talk about the size and the complexities of achieving these kind of scores, the larger the district is, the more difficult it is sometimes to hit those targets. And we're the second largest, district that there is with this list. So I think that's something that we're really proud of. Not just the high school; they're getting the recognition that they deserve, but really it comes back to the all the districts or all the buildings here that are feeding that high school with such great, incredible talent and students. So that's remarkable. Next is something that came out. It was reported on in a couple different ways, but they are now tracking chronic absenteeism last year. So chronic absenteeism is defined as a student who's missing 10% or more of the school year for any reason, unexcused or excused. So a family that takes their child out for a couple trips throughout the year, those days count against this statistic. Just like, last year this time we were dealing with COVID and some of the, quarantines and students that were sick. All those average in. And so in Wood County and Lucas County, you can see that of all the districts, there weren't any that had a lower percent than Perrysburg, which was 9%. So looking at some of the other challenges in districts, it really goes back to, I think it goes back to our staff. Our staff, doing all that they can, from the nurses, the health aides that are there to help support students through those times, to the staff that make it an environment where kids want to come back, they don't want to miss, they want to be here. I think that is really incredible, a testament to the culture that we've built here in the schools. I know Mr. Schwartzmiller, he's here. He likes to talk about, let's step outside of these counties and let's see what goes beyond these counties and how we stack up with some of the top performing districts across the state. The Ohio Department of Education says this is your peer group, and not to take anything away from our local districts, but we wanted to not pay attention to that peer group. And you can see here that of our peer group, of the number of districts that are listed here, from Beaver Creek, Worthington, Westlake, Avon, Kings, Brecksville, Loveland, Solon, Forest Hills, Twinsburg, Sycamore, Springboro, some very high-performing districts. Perrysburg, again, is second in this list. So this isn't just taking a look locally how we're performing very, very well, and I think that's a testament to our staff and our students and families that are bringing, saying it's important to come to school, and we want to create an environment where children feel good about attending, and that's shown, I think, here. I think that's the underlying story. But also from across the state, we're doing very, very well, and even districts that are just like Perrysburg and other areas of the state, we're certainly outperforming them as well. If you weren't watching the Jacket football team in marching jackets on September 23rd, and you went to see a baseball game, you might have seen some familiar faces. Mr. Bucher's junior high string ensemble was performing there, and the national anthem. So it was a great moment for those students to perform in that venue. They do a great job of people walk away from those performances saying those are junior high students, because it is so impressive what they're able to do with their musicians. A student who graduated in the class of 2021 from Perrysburg High School, who's down at BGSU, and we're very excited that she entered as an education major, so we're keeping track of her. But now, for the third year, she has coordinated a school supply drive here at the high school, at Perrysburg High School, and donate to the Ohio Migrant Education Center in Fremont, Ohio. So that sense of giving back and being an alum and staying connected to the district. Again, we're talking about students who are our students who are coming to school and staying out of that chronic absenteeism category. But here we have an alum who's saying, I'm still going to be connected to the schools, and I want to do something good. It's not just about test scores. It's about creating students that are going to do just this kind of work. So we're really happy and proud of Abby. Speaking of that, students in the marching band, you might have saw them October 8th on Saturday, going door to door, raising funds. It's a huge enterprise, and anything we can do to help ourselves with funding, our students understand the need, and they're willing to roll up their sleeves. Behind every one of these students that go out and do band tag day, there's a family that is getting up early and driving them to different locations and picking them up through the neighborhood. So we're really excited about that. It's great to see, and of course, one of the favorite sections of the band, the sousaphone players there. So they're fun to watch. One of the things that I know that we've been working with the board and certainly working through these, but we wanted to do a snapshot and appreciate Mr. Dreyer and his staff putting this together. In Ohio is an open records state where many of the public documents that government has many of the documents government has are actual public documents in Ohio, and upon request those can be turned over, and so we've been trying to keep up with the public records. It's a pretty exhaustive task when you get a public records request. There are things that we have to do to make sure that when we release that record, there isn't anything in there that shouldn't be released. So as you can imagine, when someone requests a search field that might involve many different things, there's somebody physically in the district who has to review each one of those documents to make sure that we're not releasing something with a student's name or a staff member that is confidential. And so someone physically has to touch each one of those documents to make sure that we're redacting those. So going back to 2006, you can see that for many years we would average maybe one every other month. And then in the last 2 years, we've seen a drastic increase in public records, and the complexity of those generate a lot of time where staff is handling each one of those. And also we've had to consult attorneys on some of these to determine whether or not that document is a public record or not, and which things should be redacted or not. So in the last 12 months, that number has been 64. So we went from averaging a handful a year to now several a month that we're juggling in between our regular jobs for those staff members that are handling that. Because when we start to get the volume that we receive, we try to get to those as soon as possible. The statute says that we are to complete those basically as soon as possible, which we try to do. But when you have staff that are involved, that are doing other jobs, and then they're taking, I don't know, Randy, the last one you worked on, I think, was 1,500 pages. That an individual has to sit down and go through very carefully every one of those pages. It's hard to do in between answering the phone and doing the work that we do. So that delays the ability to complete those. It's not overnight. The law says it doesn't have to complete it overnight. But we wanted to share with the board, that in the event that you're hearing about those. I think other districts that are similar to Perrysburg have seen an uptick in these kinds of requests as well. At the high school, we had, in fine arts, we had a focus art show down at BGSU, and 210 pieces of art, 12 different types of categories. And you see some of our winners here. Kendra Reddig, her artwork is there on the left. And Lacey Pierce is on the right. So it's great to see our students continuing to have their art being displayed in multiple settings. And it's something that we're really proud of. And we've had a number of others that were, probably a dozen more students that were recognized at this art show. So that's one of the early ones of the year. So that's really cool that we have so many students that are involved at that level. Last week we were thankful for Hannah Marchetto and Aaron Gallagher, a teacher at the high school, and so many others who helped make Jackets Giving Back possible. We had, as you recall, students come and give a preview of what it was, and so we had a great event. We had over 350 students, high school seniors, participate, 25 different locations throughout this region, and we certainly appreciate our donors who provided the T-shirts for all the kids, so when they're out there, and then they were recognized out at the football game at halftime. So we're very grateful, for that. So again, it's not just about test scores. It's not just about how kids are performing inside the walls, but it's really about how they're connecting with their community and beyond. And as we showcased, Abby a few moments ago, we want to instill that in all of our students, that service piece is so essential to what we do. And speaking of service, the next two slides, we wanted to highlight Erin Hinkle, who's an AP teacher, AP stats teacher, and she's one that gives up time over the summer to grade AP exams. And we don't ask her to do that. We don't pay her to do that. It's something that she feels very passionate about, to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to help support our students. As a teacher, you're seeing all those responses, and that enriches her and what she's bringing back to the classroom. But another way of giving back, because if she doesn't step up, who is going to be grading and doing that work, which is so important? UCARO training, we know that we've talked about subs in the district, and I know that's something that we'll be talking and featuring later in the board meeting with a resolution to increase sub pay in some categories. But we had UCARO is a system that is a program that we do to service our students who are on IEPs in the classroom. And so one of the things that this training does is allow students to remain in the classroom, to be unrestrained, and to work through some issues that they may be having at that moment in time. And it took, it was 8 hours of training. And normally what happens if there's training like that is needed, we get a sub, they're out of the classroom, and the administrators that were involved with the training, and certainly the teachers here, said, we can't afford to be out of the classroom. One, because the students that we serve, we know that it can be troubling to them when we're gone, so we're trying to really limit that as much as we can. And we know the subs that might be coming in might not have the skill set that we need to service our students. So they gave up, they did the training on 2 consecutive Sundays. So, when we talk about the dedicated staff that we have and the amazing job that they do, it's not just seen in test scores, but it's like saying, no, I don't want to be trained. Can we do it on a Sunday? And they gave up their time to do that. So we're really appreciative of that. We'll be sharing a recommendation later this meeting about increasing the pay and offer some incentives to fill some various positions in the district. We've undergone a review of professional development, personal days. We're trying to figure out what is, the days when we run short on subs, what are the things that contribute to that? So we're continually looking at that. The sub-pool numbers, and I think this came up during the HR board committee, but pre-COVID, actually it should read, post-COVID, we have about 120 to 125 subs in the pool. Pre-COVID, it was about 170 and 180. And you think about those numbers, it seems like a lot. But one of the things that pool, having 120, 125, isn't what you think it is. So many of the subs that we have work other jobs, and they might not be available on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So they'll put in, they can opt when they choose to work. So many are saying, I have other jobs, I can only work on these days. And then you go a little deeper, and then there are some that say, I'm really not comfortable in the high school, I only want to sub in the building in the elementaries, or maybe only this elementary. So that pool isn't meaning that there's 125 subs that are available every single day that can go to every single building. It really is very selective on what particular day, what buildings they'd like to move towards. So that is something that we wanted to highlight, that on any given day, that 120 may actually mean 45 because of the nature of their availability or where they want to serve. We had one of our elementary principals give an example of how things are going. So last year, which was a pretty hectic start of the year, there were 60 hours in August and September that were not filled by substitutes, and that means that the staff is being pulled out of their normal positions in some cases that support students and asked to sub. It means the principal is not in managing the building, and they're actually in a classroom subbing. This year, during that same time period, we were at 74 hours of unfilled subs. So the sub issue continues to be a challenge. So anecdotally, and then you see the numbers here where we're continuing to struggle with that. And we're hoping that, keeping our pay competitive, being able to offer some incentives to fill positions is something that will be a good step forward. This is from the state report card, so we thought it was interesting to share. So again, that group that we highlight, that comparison group that we showed on the second slide with the attendance data. On the left here, you see where Perrysburg is in terms of the average spending, which is on the good side of the red line going down the middle. And the performance index, we're one of the highest ones. So that group that we have is certainly great to see where we are in comparison to those. The other thing too is using the state report card, it highlighted the operating spending per pupil. We're below the average with this calculation on the state report card, so that's a good thing. But what I wanted to highlight is where we are above the state average is in classroom instruction. So we're spending more than the average on classroom instruction, which is where we want to spend those dollars, and yet overall we're spending less than the state average. So our priorities remain focused on where we stand with investing in the classroom. Non-classroom spending, we're over over $500 per pupil below the state average. So I think that is, again, we've really been zeroing in on our expenditures, where those dollars, and how we're spending the money, but also it doesn't get talked about as much. It's where we're spending those dollars. And that remains something that's important to us. We're very grateful for our orchestra boosters in Perrysburg. They brought in a world-renowned violinist and paid for him to come, and Christian House, who was at the junior high and high school, who led them through a variety of different techniques and tricks, and just to show them what can happen if they stick with it. So I've happened to sit in, not with Mr. Howes, but other guests that have come in through the same program, and it's inspiring to see how well the kids are in awe. And these musicians love being with these students, and they get them involved and have them do things, and it's just great. I think we were able to have a $500 donation that was raised to Perrysburg Schools Foundation. Mr. Bucher was part of that, so I won't talk about how they raised that money, but it looks like he cleaned up pretty well from that experience, so that's great. But again, it's from top to bottom, finding ways to help support our students through a variety of ways. If you were at the homecoming festival that took place in Perrysburg, if you notice the band circling back, we had over 400 musicians marching in that parade from the junior high and high school marching bands. They both marched in that parade, 400 students. That's larger than some of the high schools that were on the charts that we showed earlier. we talk about what we can do to help support our students, and this is a nice piece here with our freshman success team. So one of the things that was important to our administrative leaders at Perrysburg High School is how can we focus on getting students that support all students, and this is one of the ideas that came forward. So ninth grade students have that are in study hall, have access to additional supports during that time period. Before, you just sit in study hall and that was it. Now we have English, math, science, social studies teachers that are monitoring the students that are in study halls each of those periods. They're coordinating with their classroom teachers, pulling them out. We also have intervention specialists that are there. And so that time isn't just their time to kind of, to do what they want, but there is that follow-up, that checking. It's eyes on every student that is going through that study hall to see what supports they need in those core areas. So in addition to that, the school counseling team, the Link crew, and other groups also teach lessons in academic, career, emotional, and social topics on Wellness Wednesdays during the study halls. So study halls are not this passive thing that I remember when I was in school and others, but these are things where students are getting support. We're going out there. We're not waiting for them to come to us because freshmen are pretty timid. So we're continuing to move forward. We had our students perform with the BGSU Philharmonia. I'm struggling with that today. During Honors String Festival. And of course, we have the dueling piano. So some of the great things that we've done right now with our students, there's resources behind our parent groups that are making those things possible. So if you have a moment, Friday, November 11th, it's a great event at the Carinor Club, and there's information there. The school's foundation just announced their 15 proposals that they're funding, totaling over $75,000, and that's for the campaign for fine and performing arts. So these are programs and things that we're doing. Some of these are things that would be coming out of the general fund that the school's foundation is covering. So the clinicians, in terms of giving those students support in music very early at the junior high and HPI, cameras for the photography club. And that is something that otherwise we'd be knocking on Randy's door saying, hey, do we have any funds? Pottery wheels, branding wheels, kiln shelves. And we have platforms for the music students in grades 5 through 12, performances for strings and workshops. So a lot of great things that are happening through the work of the foundation and donations. Certainly our Mary Cranker, who made that significant gift, is the benefactor to this, our first over $1 million gift that we received. So we're very grateful for her. And then finally, this past week, Chris Stein, Perrysburg High School teacher for Advanced Placement U.S. History and American History, has been named the Ohio Social Studies Secondary Teacher of the Year by the Ohio Council for Social Studies. So he's a rock star, and we've known that, but now the entire state, he is the top teacher in Ohio, and so that's great. So we'll have him back at our next meeting and give him a recognition, but we wanted to highlight that. So we're really excited and proud that he's part of our team. So thank you. That's the October report.
Thank you. Yeah, that does a nice job of highlighting the work that's going on in the classrooms and the arts and music, and you mentioned too, we're coming out into the football playoffs, ranked number 9 in the state, if I read that right. So
yeah, lots of good things.
That'll be fun to watch. And then we got a feel for the impact on the students this afternoon or during the recognition, the enthusiasm and they're having for taking history tests and doing the performing arts, and also appreciate kind of showing the tough spots too.
Yeah.
The records requests, the struggle with substitutes too. So thank you for that. Any other comments or questions?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I just want to let the board, or remind the board in case you forgot, that another way to support the foundation, the Perrysburg School Foundation, is just through your many trips to Kroger's. You can make that your donation. and Perrysburg Schools Foundation is one of the places that your receipt can donate to. And so if you think about it and haven't done that yet, you can certainly do that for our foundation.
Where do you get the list of all the 15? Because that was only about 5 or 6 listed on the arts. Do you know, Sue, what all the 15 that got approved?
15, I'm sorry,
I
15.
think for
Oh, on the
the Schools
PowerPoint, it said
Foundation
15
projects.
projects were approved, and the PowerPoint only had like 5. So I was wondering, do you know the entire list?
That was probably discussed at the meeting that I was not at because I was in Vermont, but.
It just came out, so you
just
wouldn't
came
have
out,
seen that.
yeah.
Yeah, it just came out. I can get a copy to
That's
everybody.
done
I'd like
through
to
the
see that.
committee.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'll probably get that again at the next one. But when I get that list, then I'll certainly bring it if you want to see it.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, there's, as we look at all these things, we pulled out a handful that, certainly the ones we pulled out were things that we would have been using the general fund for, and then there's others that are on that list that were supplements that are over and above. So, but I can include that with the next communication with the board. So we're grateful for the Schools Foundation, all their hard work. So thanks for serving on that.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, the committees, they're hardworking committees in that group. Very hardworking committees.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hostler. Continuing superintendent's report, right, under the category of challenges that the district's working through.
Sure. And Ms. Courtney Parr is our transportation director, so she is here with us today. So she'll spot me on this because I'm going to be kind of playing in her backyard, climbing the fence, playing in transportation, which is a place that I don't always like to do. But if Courtney wanted to come up, we can kind of go through this presentation one of the things that, and feel free, Courtney, to correct me when I stray, when I go off the route. So one of the things that has come up recently, and it's been an item that's been discussed, is transporting students to non-Perrysburg public and private schools. So there's been locally and across the state, there's been a lot of discussion about this and attention on this. So we thought that it would be a good idea to maybe just highlight a little bit about what this is, what folks are talking about, why is this an issue, and then more importantly, how does it look how does this law and these rules apply to Perrysburg schools? So just about transportation, we have 28 square miles that we cover. A lot of people say, we only cover Perrysburg City, but it's actually 2 townships and the city. Middleton Township and then Perrysburg Township in addition to all the city. As of today, I don't know if it changed, we have 34 routes. We have 4 van routes, 2 dispatchers, 2 mechanics, and a director. We did a snapshot going back to 2015 to where we are today. And so we have 44 buses in 2015. We're now up to 50 buses. And 15 of those are now propane. So we've had other board meetings where we've talked about the advantages of propane. Courtney, I don't remember what it was a gallon for propane now or the last order.
So we are locked in at 98 cents a gallon. And as of today, we just locked in our last shipment of diesel at $5 a gallon.
And one of the things I really admire about the way that Courtney structures the routes, in other places where I've worked before in transportation, if you're the most senior driver, you get the new bus. It doesn't matter if you're only going 2 miles, it's kind of your right to do that. And what Courtney has done is looked at where are we, which routes are our longest routes that is using the most fuel, and then let's assign these propane buses there, regardless of the seniority piece. I know that's troubling. That's a battle sometimes with drivers who are like, I should get a new bus. I've been on the old one, but I think that shows that commitment. 33 routes in 2015, 2,100 miles daily. So I think that's like down to Disney and back. And now we're doing 34 routes with 2,800 miles daily. So that's what we're doing. I had a question that came up. Somebody said, well, with all the changes, we only added 34 routes, but I don't know if you want to describe the 3 tiers we had versus the 2 tiers, and how that works now.
Yeah, so normally we had drivers that ran HPI and junior high, and then they would pick up an elementary or a high school route. But due to the shortage, we've had to expand that. So we now have triple tier routes to where they run an HPI junior high, then the high school, and then an elementary. So what that forced us to do for the afternoon routes is to delay the high school release to get the elementary kids home on time, because that's where the time difference hits. But they've been great.
Enrollment in 2015, we had just over 5,000 students, and then September enrollment, we were at 5,700. So just in that time period, 700 more students. In 2015, we transported inside the district to 7 schools, and we're now up to 8. So we added HPI. In 2015, we had 296 non-public students and 35 students that we transported out of the district with inside and outside the district who are on IEP. So they're receiving services at a different building. The number today is 345 for non-public students. We have 70 students on IEPs that are being serviced in inside and outside the district services. Buses cover annually from 385,000 to 511,000. So, if you see our buses out on the road, they're out on the road. Now, the last time we did this kind of exercise in 2015, 75,000 gallons. And then, so we're actually down to 52,000 gallons. So there's been a reduction. And then with propane at 98 cents a gallon, we're at 43,000 gallons, so you can kind of see how that works for us. So, so just kind of what transportation is and how it works for us. So the Ohio Revised Code, there are laws in the Ohio Revised Code that guide us on how we have to operate transportation. And there's rules and regulations that come from these laws, ranging from how far students can walk to school before they're eligible to be picked up, to how frequently we can have bus stops close together, things like that. But one of the things that is in the Ohio Revised Code is it requires school districts to provide transportation for community and non-public school students, regardless of whether the school district's own schools are open for operation with students in attendance for that day. So what that means is that we have to provide transportation to students in community schools, which are like charter schools, and non-public, which are private schools, on days when our kids aren't in session. So a few years ago, a private high school called Courtney in the summer, because I remember the conversation distinctly, that said, yeah, they just changed their schedule, and I think they were starting school in July.
Yeah.
And we had to pull drivers in to cover those routes because that's required by law. Is it a challenge for us when we have all the different schools that we deliver to all on different calendars? How does that impact what you do with the drivers?
So my operations never stop. Even during the summer, we still have routes going. The breaks can be challenging, and what they just put in place is that even if we close, we're technically still supposed to transport our non-publics. So what that means is I have to go into ODE and I have to report to them why we closed, why we said it wasn't safe to transport that day.
And one of the things is that we're obligated to provide, we have to have the students at their location 30 minutes before the start of the day and no later than 30 minutes after the close of the day. So not only is it that we have to transport, and we'll get into the details of that, but we have to have them there within a 30-minute range. That creates a really challenging window to deliver. So there's some more laws there. Requires the community and non-public schools to establish the start and end times of the school year and submit that by April 1st. I know the answer to this, but of all the schools that we deal with, how many did comply with that?
1.
Okay. So, and so that law is in place to allow us to hopefully plan accordingly for the summer and those kinds of things, but there's not a lot of follow through with that. Requires school districts to inform community and non-public develop a plan, including route schedules 60 days after we receive the information. So Courtney has to communicate with those schools that we're providing transportation. And we have to come up with these plans and routes within 14 days when a student who's eligible enrolls in one of the schools after July 1. So I know one of the questions that folks have is how common is this in the country? So we're just hearing what Ohio is asking us to do, but what about other states around us? So neighboring states, and we have Indiana, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Michigan. There's no other state that requires public schools to transport outside their school district boundaries, unless in some of the states you can see where the school board can elect to do it if they choose to, but Ohio is the only one that requires that. And then what Ohio does is here that mandates that students must receive busing 30 minutes before the school, and we have to operate on their calendar, even though we're scheduled to be closed. And we have to provide comparable transportation from that school compared to what we have within reason. So this creates kind of a challenge for us. So Courtney, I'll let you kind of talk through maybe this next slide.
Real comparable transportation means the type of bus being used? Or?
Type of bus. It's really open to interpretation. So comparable would be if we're making high school kids who are being transported to private schools and charter schools outside the district and they have to walk 5 miles to catch the bus, that is not consistent with what we're asking our students to do. We do, and Courtney will maybe touch on this, but we have group stops where all the kids from our neighborhood, Perrysburg schools, walk to one location. With private schools, because they're not all going to the same school and they're not all in the same neighborhood, it becomes almost door-to-door service. It makes it a little bit of a challenge. So, and as we struggle with the numbers, those are things that we have to look at, having pickup points throughout the district. Other districts are beginning to do that. So these are, so this is this year's information, Courtney. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. So this is who we transport for this year. I have 3 drivers that are our early birds. They are in at 6 a.m. and they start their non-public routes then. They go through the district and they meet at the junior high around 7 a.m. and then they it's organized chaos because the kids get off their bus and onto the other buses, and from there we go to Rossford and we meet Rossford and we help out Rossford and they help us out. So then we're able to cover more ground to get the kids to school on time. And then in the afternoon, it's the same, but we actually all meet at the junior high and distribute the kids and work from there.
So to give you kind of a different perspective, here's a map of Northwest Ohio, and you can see where the red dots are. That's where we have buses going every single day, delivering students who live in the community attending the private and charter schools throughout Northwest Ohio. To give it perspective, we deliver to we have 8 buildings in our district we deliver to, but we deliver double that amount outside our district every single day. So we actually, on a daily basis, if we ask the question, do we deliver to more Perrysburg buildings or non-Perrysburg buildings, the answer would be non-Perrysburg buildings, more than double. So we have, Perrysburg uses 3 buses to transport students to out of district buildings, and 3 more buses to transport in district with St. Rose. So we have a total of 6 buses every day that are dedicated to non-Perrysburg students that we're servicing. So that's 6 drivers, that's 6 buses that were tied up every single day. She mentioned, and we really appreciate her work with this in Rossford schools. Mr. Krebs there, it's been a great relationship where we can actually, deliver to more because we're utilizing each other's resources to do that. And then we've also gotten involved with van routes, especially students, some students with IEPs, transporting them instead of a bus, a van. So those are, again, drivers that we're using and utilizing that to transport that student. So so how many out of district non-Perrysburg public student buildings are we really responsible for? So I'm going to jump back into the Ohio Revised Code. So what it says in Ohio Revised Code 3327.01, a Board of Education shall not be required to transport elementary or high school pupils and from a non-public or community school where such transportation require more than 30 minutes of direct travel time as measured by a school bus from the public school building to which the pupils would be assigned if attending a public school designated by the district of residence. So I'll translate that for you. So what the state law says is that public school districts in Ohio have to are responsible to transport students who live, who may be attending a school 30 minutes away from their home, the school that they would be attending in Perrysburg. So based on a bus route, a reasonable travel time. So think about that. So let's say a student is attending school at Toth and wants to go to a school maybe 25 minutes away. Then we would have to wrestle with the process of determining whether or not we can transport, but that student has a right to be transported to that. So I wanted to and this is a great exercise that Courtney put together to say, so within that 30-minute radius, more or less, how many schools are we actually responsible for if we had students attending to deal with this issue if requested? Are there any guesses? Yeah, it's 75. So this becomes a challenge that we're looking at in terms of as we get into this. So while you're beginning to hear this, this discussion and districts starting to, with lawsuits and those kinds of things and challenges, in Ohio, all public schools are responsible for this, for providing that kind of coverage, and there's a very procedurally unfriendly process for those families and for school districts to comply with this. So I want to put it in a map. So here's a map just looking north of Perrysburg, not even south because we couldn't really fit it very well here. But most of the schools I mentioned before, this is where they're located. And we're responsible if that happens. So it's putting us in an impossible situation because there's no way we can do that. And we're struggling transporting our own students right now, and those that we can raise our hand and say, we can make this happen for you. Now, for those that might be looking at this, okay, Toledo Academy or Regina Chaley, those are up there. So a disclaimer, the 30 minutes varies based on that law, based on where that student is attending. So a school could be eligible technically if you live at Toth, if your child's going to attend Toth and you're heading north versus HPI, which is further south because it is a 30-minute. It's not miles, it's minutes. So some schools, depending on where you live in the district, what building you would attend could be eligible, could not be eligible. So I just want to put a disclaimer based on that. So the revised code. Courtney, I know we talked about this chart is using in fiscal year. There was an ODE did this analysis in 2017 about the cost to transport our students versus non-public and charter school students.
And you've seen it decline,
Yeah.
I believe, with everything.
So when you average out the annual cost to transport a Perrysburg student or a public school student on average, it's $824 for a year. And then when it's a non-public student, it's $3,740 per year, and then a charter school is $2,618. So why are there some cost differences with that in terms
It
of
costs
operations?
more because the ridership is usually less. So that fluctuates with your ridership, depending on if you have a full bus compared to a half full bus or just a few students. And you'll see that continuously change with the school enrollment.
Yeah. So when we get phone numbers or when we get phone calls, Courtney and I, and let's say Denny calls and says, every morning I see a school bus traveling down 475 at 7:30 a.m. and there's like 2 kids on it. Why can't you guys get your act together and do a better job of that is a bus that's in this category.
Yes. Yep.
Denny would never do that, so, no, no, thank you. But I think that's it. You see buses that only have a few kids in it that are traveling, up and down 75, 475, and people wonder, like, what is that all about? And it is, it's one of the 19 buildings that we're delivering kids to every single day.
I've worked a couple efficiency studies, and for the state of Ohio, you have to have at least 35 students on your bus to label it efficient. So anything less than that, they're gonna ding your district.
So one of the things that we have, cost to transport students using that number, just to give you, using the state numbers in 2017, 345 non-public students, it's $1.2 million versus 345 students that are here in Perrysburg, it's $284,000. So to your point about that efficiency, because again, our students have group pickups and drop-offs. Students that are charter school, private school students, they don't because there aren't students that are going to those other buildings nearby. So it becomes door to door. And also those routes are typically longer because of that, because we're driving from point to point, across the district. So this is something, Courtney, maybe you want to just...
Yeah, so this is off of our report last year. To just turn a key in our district to run a route is around $80,000. That tells us the driver costs, the fuel, the wear and tear on the bus, the repairs, everything. So when you break that down, for our drivers, it's their rate, I think I touched base on that, and their insurance. So the per day rate is $449, they're per hour, and then per eligible student. So that's going off of our counts this year after combining routes and everything else like that to see where we were at.
So the state of Ohio does this report. I know you live in this world, so.
So this is our T1. This is what we have to fill out, and this is a breakdown. This is our overhead cost, all of our salaries, tires, fuel, your total cost, everything for our shop, tools. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything, our insurance. This is what we turn into the state. And all honesty, they don't really do much with it other than they want to make sure your bookkeeping is correct.
And then this drills down to our specific school district.
Yes. Is that RT1 still?
And then, and so obviously delivering to 75 different, so if we had one student in the district who attended all of those eligible schools, 75 different schools outside the district, that would be impractical for us to be able to deliver those students. So the state in the Ohio Revised Code in another section talks about declaring impracticality of transportation and offering payment in lieu. So this board approves payment in lieu payments to certain families that request it at schools that we deem to be impractical. And then I won't go through this, but generally speaking, there are in the law there are several pieces that say how this has to operate. The reasons that schools generally do this, the time and distance required for the transportation, if it's in that 30-minute range around Perrysburg, the number of pupils. So if there's just one student heading out to a place that's 27 minutes away, the discussion would be, is it practical for us to pull that driver off one of the other routes to transport that one student on that one bus to get them? That also, we talked a little bit about the costs and how we're trying to keep those costs down. So transporting that one student to that one location on the bus is quite high. Look at similar transportation. So there's kind of a checklist that we have to go through before we reach that point to say that is impractical. So this is what is right now that the board has already resolved, and you may remember this at a previous board meeting. But you can see these buildings where we have students, where families have said, we are requesting transportation. We say it's impractical, and then the board pays those families for each student $538 annually. And you can see those schools and the number of students that are attending those schools. And so question that people might have is when did all this happen? So a little bit of history. In 1965, a law was passed in Ohio that provided school children with safe transportation and extended the law to cover all children attending a school which the state board educates prescribed minimum standards, thus including non-public schools. So that was 1965, and then supported in a court case in '68. So when you think about when this law was passed in 1965, what did it look like in 1965? And, you know, in 1965, there were no charter schools in Ohio. You had your local public schools, and then you had a handful of private schools. In 1965, there weren't IEPs, and students that had disabilities and were in school programs generally were handled by counties, and they provided all the transportation. And in 1965, most religious schools were local parishes. They had the church, and right next to the church there was a school, and everybody in the neighborhood went to that church, and everybody went to that. They would choose of that faith if they wanted to go to that school. So there wasn't a need to transport those students because they walked to the neighborhood church school in most cases. So today we have a very different system where we have a large number of charter schools that are across the region. We have parents that are now, you know, bypassing the local religious school to attend another religious school, maybe in another community. You know, so things have changed dramatically. And, you know, again, this is one of my the slides that we always highlight, that why this is happening and this law is a little bit outdated, in my opinion, because times certainly have changed. And then bringing it back to Perrysburg, and you know, every new student that is enrolled is a new bus route, because we have to reroute the bus to accommodate that new student. So all summer, the routes are being changed and updated. So when you look at just last year, where we have 37 new kindergartners alone from last year to this year. So they had 367 kindergartners last year. We have 404 first graders. So if half of those ride the bus, you know, now we're looking at 15 new riders and 15 new stops, which and then look at the number that goes up, and that is the battle that Courtney and her staff face every single day. So it is an ongoing challenge, you know, with what we do. So as we get into the law, it doesn't really reflect the current environment in education. It is our enrollment is rapidly increasing. We're Northwest Ohio's fastest growing school district. So just keeping up with our own is a challenge. We added Hall Prairie, which widened, created another tier in some cases. And then additionally, in 1965, if you had female sports, it would just be a few, if any. And today, you know, we're looking at over 25 high school athletic teams that are going gangbusters every single day to all different directions, 18 competitive teams at the junior high at the same time. So it is a complex operation, and then to have this piece kind of layered in that people don't think about, but it is something that is beginning to become a challenge because we're feeling the squeeze everywhere. And so we do a great job. It's, you know, this isn't about whether or not we agree with choice or private schools or vouchers or anything like that. This is just a conversation about, you know, what the law requires us to do, what we're responsible for, and certainly how we operate within that space. I know I attended a private high school, and we woke up extra early and caught a bus and got dropped off at another location and stood out in the cold for, it seemed like, for hours for another bus to come pick us up, and then did the same in reverse. You know, so it's something that people,
both ways, right?
yeah. So it's something that people understood. That's what we have, and we do the best we can. So we've got the relationship with St. Rose. Very positive, and we try to maintain that. And
on top of that, we take a lot of the non-public schools field trips. We help them out if they reach out to us. Any type of, you know, helping hand, we try our best to do.
So since this is the bus driver shortage is national, not just Perrysburg or even Ohio, but since Ohio has this screwy law, which I have always fought about. I didn't realize it went all the way back to 65. I thought it was in the late 70s. Is there, I mean, it can't fall on deaf ears in Columbus that this is problematic, and how much it would help each public school district to get rid of this law. Is there any chance of that happening? I mean, they did so many other things during the COVID crisis that, you know, well, we're going to rescind this for now for a period of time and see how it works and blah, blah, blah. Why isn't this getting done? This is not really COVID related. This is a problem that they've generated that we need some help with. Every district in Ohio needs help with this.
I don't think we have the climate right now to see that law being rolled back, because I think there is an interest in seeing, you know, supporting private schools and parent choice, and you know, that's where Ohio is right now. I think there's some things, Sue, to your point that I think would be very helpful, and just some simple things I think that are reasonable. And when Courtney got that phone call and said, you know, this school just said, we're going to start up in July because we're going to get in as much as we can, and then COVID's probably going to shut us down, you know, we had to react to that. So maybe setting up some rules saying, you know, that our calendar is here, and maybe we can provide transportation during that time, but if you're operating outside of those dates, then maybe transportation is something that is optional, or if we can provide it or not. Those little things would go a long way. So I think there's things that we can do strategically that would help and still continue to provide a service to those schools and to those families, because those families are here, they're paying taxes, and we understand when you make that choice, you know, there's a sacrifice for those kind of choices. And you know, my parents made that choice for me, and my youngest brother, they didn't make it for him, and so each family makes that decision, and it's a personal decision. But I think that where we are now, there's some things that we can do to help support that, but not in a way that is creating such a rigid, because the one thing we didn't get into, and it's a whole nother conversation, which is the penalties for not complying with this.
That was my next question. Like this, you said out of all of these schools that we're sending kids out of our district to, only one complied with the April 1st law. Well, what's the consequence for those who didn't bother to follow the law?
Unfortunately, there isn't anything
Well,
that's
there you
there.
go.
But I do think that I do think that you know, there are those kinds of things that we can look at in trying to make it more user friendly for those families and also for us. One of the things that we're hearing from the department right now, which is really frustrating, is, and they told us to Courtney, like, if you get challenged, don't start off by saying you don't have enough drivers. That's not an excuse, and you can't use that as a reason not to provide transportation. And that's, so it's like, okay, so that it's that kind of tone deaf, I would describe it, is really not understanding the challenges that we face. So I think Courtney's had a great voice in this, and that, you know, we don't want to necessarily, we want to provide the service because we value that and we value supporting our families, but doing it in a way that we can manage and not take away from one group to help provide for another group. And then looking at the process, again, that would be that other conversation is, you know, when there is a challenge and we say we don't have a bus to send that one student or two students to that one school, the rules say, well, you have to provide transportation until you resolve this. So it's like, well, we don't have a bus to provide transportation for that student in that school, but the procedure says you have to provide it until you get it worked out. So it comes back to this isn't really helpful, a little bit tone deaf.
If you could work it out, it'd be worked out.
We'd do it, right. So I think it's based on a time when they were trying to prevent schools from saying no. And that's why those rules get there. But now, because we've had so many schools added and so many things that have changed since when this law hit the books, no one has really stood up to say, we need to take a look at this, and not to be punitive to any group, but to find a reasonable path forward. So, yeah.
Courtney, question. What does the district do that doesn't have buses like in Ottawa Hills or Grandview, Ohio? Like, do they
So,
still require?
Sometimes a school district will cab out or contract out. You see that quite a bit, especially if they have students that are transported outside the district, special needs. I know I've worked with Ottawa Hills. I've spoken with their director a couple times on different situations. Some districts will partner up, like we do with Rossford. I've also reached out to like Mommy and other ones to see who's traveling through, but it's all about timing. That's the worst part of it. You have to line it up just right to make sure, and you get caught by a train or the traffic on the bridge, you're not going to make it there on time.
Or you have to drive
So if the
through
district
Maumee?
doesn't have buses themselves, they are still required to do,
Yes.
okay?
Yep. They
Interesting.
have to, if you ever get questioned by the state, you have a checklist that you have to go through, and that's going to be one of them, or what have you done outside the box to make sure you cannot transport this child?
When we reduce transportation for high school students, so K-8 is required by law. I'm sorry, not K-8, K-8
Yeah,
is
K-8,
required by
yeah.
law.
High school's that.
9 through 12 is not. So when we said as a district that during COVID that we're not going to provide transportation for 9 through 12, we don't have to provide transportation to non-public students in 9 through 12. It had that line that I said earlier about being comparable, that would be another category. So if we're not offering it to our 9th through 12th graders, then we don't have to offer it for them. It has to be comparable, so. All right.
So in the tier 1, tier 2, how is that, monthly?
So
Really?
the T1 is yearly. That is all of our expenses for the year. And then the T2 is count week. So that is our student ridership and our mileage for that whole week. That is the first full week of October. We do counts in the morning, afternoon, our middays, everyone that gets transported, the odometer readings from morning to afternoon, everything in between. And you want to claim that. And what you get funded on with that is ridership or mileage, so whatever's higher. So with us triple tiering, our mileage might be a little bit higher. It depends.
And how do they fund that?
ODE does a breakdown on that with your ridership. They'll do a comparison on that. With how many routes you have, how many student riders you have, we have to enter in all that data. The newest thing that they've added for us is we actually have to put in our whole fleet mileage. So all 50 buses, I have to put in there yearly what our odometer reading is, and they want to see how many buses we are actually using throughout the year.
And that's consistent with all schools throughout the state.
The whole state, yep.
Public schools,
Public, yep.
yeah. But we get, and it's a point of emphasis of the financial audit. They will audit our T1 and T2 reports this year. The state has put an emphasis on that.
Yeah, so if I look at the T1 report of fuel, it says 41,000. That certainly is not.
Nope, so that was just during that time frame. So how it lines up with us buying fuel.
Just that 1 week in October.
Not for that. For the expenses, it's gonna be July to July, but it depends if we aren't running a lot of trips that year or how that falls in.
So you're doing the T1 report a year behind. So after the fiscal year, we sit down, we go through the financials, we enter that data into it. And it's broken down exactly what's there. That's how we enter it. Then we have to specify how much of that is special needs riders and how much are general education riders. So because there is a funding difference on that. And then for this year, next Friday, I will have our this year's funding report, and we'll know what exactly they're funding on transportation. We don't know at this point. Last year, it was about $1 million is what we get from the state for transportation.
So, Mr. Hostler, is there some discussion going on about this policy since 65 that hasn't changed? Because I hear in reading the papers, some school districts are having the same problem. And trying to be as fair as we can be with transporting, because we do want to help out the families in our district, but sometimes it's impossible, looking at the statistics you give here, to do so.
You know, it's something that we're now beginning to talk to some of our legislators about, and also at ODE, because I know they do the hearings and trying to, but they're handcuffed with the board has to take action, and We haven't, so it's just something that's now starting to percolate up across Ohio. So Cleveland area, I think Courtney probably has had more of these kinds of things. Columbus is starting to see more. We've had a couple things here locally.
I know some Cleveland area directors that are waiting until July for their hearings. So during that meantime, ODE is telling them you're still supposed to transport those students.
So this is an area, though, as I've talked about board advocacy, as board members, our local legislators, it'd be helpful to hear from you. BASA, in Tom's case, and OASBO, in my case, are addressing these kind of issues, but, and I think we're effective. We've got good people doing that, but you as board members and representatives, elected representatives of the community, carry a lot more weight in your voices to talk with our state senator and state reps. And I think I would encourage you to do so. And if you need data from us, we certainly help you with that.
That's a nice reminder, Randy. Thank you. And Courtney, while you're here on behalf of the board, thank you for everything you and your staff and the bus drivers and mechanics do
Thank you.
to service the students, service the community. It's probably a little bit like the furnace. Nobody ever notices it when it's working well. You sure hear about it when it isn't. So thank you for what you and your team does.
Thank you, guys. If you see my drivers out, give them a wave. Tell them thank you because they have been phenomenal. So thank you,
Courtney, I
guys.
had a question for you from somebody that I had lunch with a couple of weeks ago about the, I feel so out of it not being on operations because I know we would have talked about this and that. Do we have the app where parents can look on their phone, be notified where the bus is at, if it's running late, running early,
So
whatever?
we are working towards it. We have a new software program that we have just kind of finalized things on. It's been really great for the drivers. So now I actually just got off the phone on my way over here with our tech support. They're supposed to be lining it up. We're gonna do a rolling start with that. So I'll start with high school and then work our way down to make sure everything is working smoothly. As of right now, it's just gonna be an app that's gonna tell them their bus stop and their time, and we can actually alert them if the bus is running behind through that app to where it will come up as a notification. And then we are looking at changing our GPSs on the bus. So what that will do is give them a 5-minute real-time alarm saying, hey, the bus is 5 minutes away. And that I'm hoping to have in the next couple months.
Okay.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's a challenge because it takes our student software system, which has all their addresses and everything, and then it mashes it with your system, which does the routing, and then ties in with the GPS. So it's trying to mash all these 3 different systems so that they play nice.
On top of new roads that are just happening everywhere
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
on the map,
So
yeah.
did we have something similar
we
to
have
that
something?
at one point? That
We
didn't
did
work?
last year.
We're not
Okay.
using it now?
No, we have new software. Everything's brand new. We're transitioning. The software that we had was very outdated with the mapping and the transitions through the new housing developments. It wasn't updated. So we'd go in and the drivers would have directions that would say road unknown. So we have this as a new software program, TransFinder.
Company or?
Yes, whole new company, whole new everything. And we had some hiccups with them in the summer to where I actually spent all summer meeting with the drivers, going through their routes and going through everything, making sure we had every kid, which was really nice in the long-term effects for us as a district.
Excellent. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
I like doing puzzles, but I don't know that I would like doing puzzles.
I couldn't do that.
And I know Courtney has to be at her office in less than probably 11 hours, so thank you.
Okay, if it's right with the board members, while Randy sets up, we're gonna ask for a 5-minute break, or we'll reconvene back at 7 o'clock.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go out and get my drink.
Yeah, walk up here.
Gretchen and I used to freeze together. No, bringing a blanket. I did bring her a blanket one time. It's crazy. This is why I just wear my coat. I can't wear enough clothes.
Okay, I think we've given Mr. Drewer enough time to walk over to the podium and put his notes out, so. We're back in
And I
session.
apologize, I've been, I'm getting encouraged to make this very short, either between the temperature in here or just the impatience of administrators wanting to go home. But too bad, guys. All right, before I jump into I want to editorialize just a little bit, because I think you figured out by now I like to build on stuff that Tom's reported. Just think about that 345 students that we go to other schools and our current situation of handling the students that we have. The non-publics and the private schools are good partners of ours, and we need them because we couldn't house all those students anyway at this point. So we don't see it as a negative. The transportation is a challenge, but they're part of that choice, and our families have that choice. So, we kind of bristle sometimes a little bit about some of those things, but recognize they're an important piece of this community. A couple of other things I want to mention. If you haven't bought your tickets yet for Shakespeare in Love, do. I've got my seats on the aisle. I'm ready to go. Dinner and a show for the wife. It's the best date you can pull off, right? A lot cheaper than the $100+ I spent on Les Mis a couple weeks ago in Cleveland. But I also want to say, the last couple weeks I got to attend a strings concert in the fall and the choral and select strings, and I tell you, it's amazing. You start looking at the numbers of kids we have in the strings program, the band's pretty awesome, and it just, for me as a parent of art and athlete students, it was wonderful. So, and the other thing I want to talk about is Tom mentioned those top 10 school districts, a couple ahead of us in terms of costs. If you don't know where Versailles is, it's in northeast Darke County. Very nice school district, nice area, great farmland, very, very tight community, and very, very homogeneous community. And Minster sits on southwestern Auglaize County, but touches Mercer, Darke, and Shelby counties. It's right there, and it's the same type of community. Their farming communities the community really is built around those school districts, and it's kind of so it kind of puts you in perspective. Not only smaller, but they're just a totally different type of world than we're used to. So let me jump into a couple of things. I don't normally talk about the report too much. You've got the 70-some pages in there, but I want to hit on a couple of things. This month on donations, for the first time since we started here a couple months ago, if you go on like 10th page in there, there's a list of donations, and Tom's already hit on it. The foundation has put about $30,000 towards low brass instruments for our band, sousaphones in particular, which are very expensive items, and you saw that they're supporting our clinicians, donation back to the school so we can have clinicians. And so there's $35,000 from the foundations for that, and then the athletic boosters bought a new trailer, and athletic boosters made a contribution to the swim team. So you can see those donations in there. I won't point them out every month, but it's something really new going on this month. So let's start by talking about where we are right now. So we're 25% into the fiscal year. Can't believe we're all that fast. And we are from the revenue side, we're tracking, right where we would expect. About 40% of our revenue is in, and again, I want to remind you, remember we get real estate taxes twice a year, and property tax allocation twice a year, and then income tax quarterly, and then our state aid is what comes in monthly. And we're ahead of last year by 7%. It's elevated a little bit. In all fairness, you see the last line on the revenue, a refund of a previous year expense. We got a unexpected check in July for expenses for a previous year from a refund. And my choices to handle it are to go back, open the previous year and reduce the expenses or add it as a line item to this year. And because $138,000 is a lot, but on a $70 million budget, it wasn't really worth to restate the financials for that. The auditor's okay either way with it as long as it's kind of above the line. So it's a one-time, I'm not expecting to get that revenue again. So, but we're doing real well on the revenue side. Here at the end of the next week, we get our next foundation payment. So that'll be our first payment based on this year's enrollment and this year's numbers. So it'll give me a better idea of where we are for the rest of the year in terms of our state funding. And then also, obviously, at the end of October, we get our second income tax payment of the year. Again, that gives you a better idea on the trend on where we are. Because you can see our income tax was up 16% year over year. Excuse me. Obviously, I don't expect that to continue, but that'll give us a better idea on the revenue side. On the expenses side, we're right on where we're expected. We're 25% of the year through the year. We've spent 23% of where we are. I want to point out on salaries. If you look at salaries, slightly less as a percentage over last year, and we are now caught up on the 24 versus 26 pays. Last September was our last 3 pay month. And so going forward, it'll be a lot easier to compare month to month because we have the 2 pays a month like we did last year going forward. So that's a good point to tell at this point. And so we're just tracking about where we expect at this point. And I'll talk about some challenges here in a minute. And we're at 123 cash days. Again, if we had no revenue, we could run for 123 days before we'd run out of cash. So we're in a good place. That's a healthy cash balance. And this is our cash balance chart. The blue line, since the levy passed in 2019, we're right we expect. We'll draw that down until we hit our lowest point in the end of January, early February. And that's why we got to carry a cash balance, just because of the unevenness of when we get our real estate tax checks. So just a quick recap. We're 25% through the year. No concerns about revenue. Our investments are strong. So if you're borrowing, it's hurting you. But for those of us who have money sitting in money markets, our biggest chunk is Star Ohio. It's up to almost 3%. And that's completely liquid money. Literally, if we need money to make payroll, we move money out of Star Ohio, and all our excess funds are in Star Ohio because it's paying so well. So just for example, last year at this time, we had made $7,000 in investments. This year we're at $178,000.
Wow.
And it's obviously we can argue the economy impact, but it's going to come back to get us in a couple other areas here I'll talk about. So it's good, but there's obviously a downside to part of that. And then state funding, I'll kind of wait and see here at the end of next week, and then we'll have a better idea where we look the rest of the year. Expenditures, we're right where we need to be, but a couple concern areas. Fuel. Our diesel fuel at $5 and is more than we expected at this time. So we're going to be looking at having to update our fuel budgets. We're locked in on propane, which is nice, but you can't get that same price fixing on diesel because as a dealer, I'd be afraid to guess on locking in on pricing. So we're spending a lot more on diesel. We haven't spent our entire budget yet, but our last fuel, we spent half of it already, and we're only a quarter way through the year. So that's a concern. Tom hit on the labor market, drivers, classified staff, and substitutes. We've got some proposals. They don't have a huge impact on our salaries, but they will impact. And so we're going to have a little bit higher in the area of salaries if we actually get more people and so we get paying these incentives and these referrals. And the last thing is goods and services are continue to grow, are expensive. Our maintenance folks are struggling. They've spent much of their budget already just because of the cost of goods and breakdowns, like the boiler here in this building, which is causing some issues in temperature here. All those things are concerns. They're not going to fundamentally, I don't think, change the forecast, but they are concerns. And anyway, so that part is, just want to kind of give you that heads up. So I want to step back just for a couple of minutes, just talk about on a big picture. When we look at our spending, this chart breaks down our spending in the major areas that are that we see on the 5-year forecast. The 61% of our spending goes to salaries, 23% to benefits, and then 10% to purchase services. So 94% of our spending is really, in those three areas. On the salary side, 71% of our salary spending, and this is just out of general fund. This does not include federal grant monies, which a lot of our federal grant monies are for salaries too. Okay, but this is just general fund. 71% of our salaries are certified staff. So Tom showed that data where we spend more in the classroom than state average, and this is where it's showing up. That's teachers, intervention specialists, school counselors, certified staff. 12% are classified. That's our bus drivers, custodians. Does not include food service because they're in a different fund. But if we had food service, then they'd be a little bit higher. And then 11% is administrative. And 6% are supplementals, our coaching salaries, stipends, and that kind of things. On the benefit side, 54% of our benefit expenditures in health insurance. So that is really a big deal. And 41% are retirement, and that's tied directly to salaries. And the last 5% are really all other benefits, life insurance, Medicare, that kind of stuff. Finally, purchase services, our third biggest area. 65% of our purchase service dollars are for special education. The biggest chunk of that is our paraprofessionals, we have 66 of them right now, and that's driven by IEPs and directly anybody needs the students, we contract through Wood County ESC for. So that's a big portion. That's $2 million of that. So special education, the biggest need. That 26%, that red, that's the operations. That's things like our utilities, maintenance expenses, like that. So we're really, the money the district spends is going to students, right? And so like maintenance runs on a shoestring budget, and it's reflected in that red. That last 9% are board and admin. That means insurance, legal bills, the expenses for the board, those kind of things that are overhead. So it gives you an idea of our basic expense areas. So it is on people, right? We're in a people business. That's where the district spends its money. A couple other things real quick. Our auditors were in the last 2 days, and this is like, blows my mind. They came in Monday morning. We put them in a 60-degree room, and then they left today. So, and that is the benefit of electronic methods, using less paper. They're not done, but they can do a lot of their work remotely because they have access to our financial system. And they come in, they meet with some of my staff, they meet with Don Christie's staff, and they'll meet with food service, and they'll do some other things. So there's not just financial stuff, it's bigger than that. And they're very complimentary of Don's staff, how helpful they were, Kelly Wells and my thing. We treat the auditors, we try to treat them, they're not an enemy, right? They're here to do a job, and we try to help them as best we can, because they're also end up being a good source of information for us. Sometimes, because depending on who you get for an auditor, they may have different ideas how you should do things. So that hopefully that'll be wrapped up by December, which will be about 3 months earlier than it was last year. A couple of things else going on. We talked about last month. We're implementing integrated payables with Huntington, which essentially means when we do pay our bills, we send Huntington a file. They look at all the vendors, and they know our preference on how to pay them. If they'll take credit card, we use that first. If they won't take a credit card, we do ACH. If they don't take that, then we'll send them a check. And And Huntington manages that for a very nominal fee, so one person in our office could handle more transactions. And we're not printing checks, not as many checks, and that's real expensive. And plus, checks are your biggest source of fraud. We have deferred compensation plans for the staff, 403B, 457 if you're in that nomenclature. We've changed our third-party administrator. We were out of compliance with the IRS with our previous one, and no one knew it. And frankly, they didn't care because they were hoping that we would go away. So that's a great business model. We really don't want to be in this business, so if you just go away, we'd appreciate that. 5-year forecast, quick update. So the work session, I'm going to go through the forecast in detail with the board, so you have a chance. I'm going to focus a lot on the assumptions because assumptions will drive the numbers, and they'll have a chance for you to question, our thinking on that. And then the Finance Committee will have another shot at it before I bring it to the board at the November regular meeting. So you'll have a couple opportunities to look at those numbers. I know Lori's really looking forward to all the numbers on that, but she's begging, please don't make me sit through this. But that's coming up. The work session, we'll spend some time on that. So that's where we are. That's our financial report. Not as fast as Mr. Schwartzman would like, but too bad.
Still fairly pithy for you, though, so congratulations.
Let me make one other comment on that. Just reminded me. We were in a meeting this morning at HPI, Brent, Mr. Schwartzmiller, and I, and Dr. Glesser, talking about expenses for personnel and trying to support students. And what really I walked away from was building leadership, looking at their personnel costs and go, how can I support students in a way that's as cost effective as possible, not just adding people. Obviously, if we need to do that, we look at it, and I was really kind of pleased by that. We got this problem we need to solve, but I think we can solve it using our existing personnel. It may cost a little bit more, but not as much as adding people. And then at the same time, that same thinking goes, if you looked at the enrollment numbers that Tom has shared with us, that 3rd and 4th grade classes are huge, right? It's going to be, when both of them are 5th and 6th grade, it's another, 80 students than what he has today in that building. How are you going to do that with your current staff if possible? And so some of these things we're looking at, we'll be able to use existing personnel and try to handle some of that. So, we talk about trying to save money by using propane buses on the long routes. It's also, there's some cost avoidance, but trying to get the best return and supporting our students with the people we have. And I think we got a building leadership who are thinking in those terms, not just throwing new bodies at them, assuming that we could even get them if we could find them. So I will shut up now unless you have any questions.
I had a question. You mentioned expenses are going to be a concern. So what's the solution to those concerns?
Well, I think let's go back to this. We have a cash balance. So, and we got to be careful. We got to protect that because we've got a levy coming up. But we ask the questions all the time. Do we really need to spend this money? And James and I on the operations side have these conversations. James does a great job of not coming to me asking for. He tries to work within his current budget. A budget is a budget. But we also know that if the boiler's broken at the junior high, it doesn't matter if we have the budget or not, it's got to be fixed. Right. And the first question is there someplace else that we can reduce the budget to do that? That's our first. Yeah. That's our first step, and we try it. But probably on the fuel, we will not be able to. We're not going to do it. Fortunately, our revenue is coming in a little bit ahead of where we expected, so we do have a little bit to work with and still try to meet. Try to end the year in the black, right? That's the goal. And so there's not an answer, Kelly, but we're just trying to say, I say no first, and then you convince me to say yes. And then there's little things like, they don't add up to be a lot, but I can tell you my staff is really good about approving purchases, for example, that have shipping costs. Do they really need to have shipping costs? Could they have bought this somewhere else and not have shipping costs? Watching those little things, when you have 8 buildings ordering stuff, it's not going to get to hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we might hit tens of thousands of dollars. So it's those kind of little things. We're not quite counting paper clips yet, but we're there. The copiers, James negotiated a new deal on copiers. We've reduced the number of color copiers we have. It's created some heartache among the staff, but that's a significant cost reduction if we can get past inconvenience and really look at, what do we really need? It's those kinds of things that we're looking at. And I said we got a good business partner with James Mapus does a good job of looking at those kinds of things. And we are looking at things like our natural gas and electric contracts. We're locked in pricing on them, but what do we do for future years? And we're having those conversations now. And the big one will be we don't know what our insurance premium change will be. We're just doing that analysis now to see if we need to raise our premiums for health insurance. I'm going on a limb here. I'm guessing we will, but it'll be small. It'll be small.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Get you a coat.
So I need we're on item 7.2, approve the September financials. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Ms. Larimer?
Second?
Mr. Pullman? And roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Mr. Pullman,
Yes.
Dr. Reffert,
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. Okay, now it's time for board committees and discussions. We'll start with Personnel Committee. Mr. Pullman, Dr. Reffert.
Well, I'll just start out and then I'll let you finish it up because you're good at that stuff. With respect to your knowledge of HR in Toledo schools, there's going to be 3 things that we're going to be asked to approve if you look at 12.5, 11.3, and 13.2. But basically what we're looking at is HR has proposed to us to increase the need for our substitutes in both the teacher and the classified to increase their salaries. Well, actually it's stipends. And also there's some incentive with respect to making recommendations to central office. So anyway, it's there in front of us, and there's definitely a need to do that. And one of the things you'll see a 5.8% increase, and that's basically because it has not been reviewed since 2016, so it's a little bit behind with respect to what it's due. Competition, right? You can go into McDonald's or Burger King and see the hourly rate is actually higher than some of the things we've been paying here. And so we need to continue to attract people to do the jobs that are needed to be done. So that's my 2 cents worth there. You want to add to that, Dr. Reffert?
No, it was a really good discussion about comparable districts and what we're paying, and the conversation about what people could make at a fast food restaurant or at a local business and what we need to pay our subs. So it was lots of information out there, and still frightening that we're not able to fill some positions in our district.
So I had a question. I saw that, so increase the daily rate for subs and then do this incentive where you work a certain amount of days and then you increase it. But I saw the comps, but are other schools doing that? I didn't see where. I saw it was going to be comparable, but then we're going above what other districts are doing.
Yes, I believe it's modeled off of Maumee, which is a very, obviously, a school district we're in competition with, trying to get subs. So I believe that was something we discussed last month, and Mr. Christie looked into that, and they're modeling that incentive pay from other districts. I know in our district that I work for that we're also reviewing things like that, trying to get people in to cover classes. And it's very competitive right now, and it's across the country, unfortunately, trying to find subs, just like bus drivers.
Yeah, I think it's a little higher than mommy's, but
Well, we want it to be competitive. We want to attract people here. So typically, they always make comparisons to other school districts to see where they're at. But
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Operations Committee, I believe Mr. Pullman, Mrs. Eubank.
yeah, the biggest thing you'll see in operations, I think, is notable. You read the notes there. Is one of the things, of course, with cybersecurity and the Whitmer High School situation that they've taken care of is that IT is certainly getting together all the schools and how can we improve? What can we do? They're working on that, and also because insurance is going to dictate on how your security is. So IT is currently working to improve and along with Randy to see what type of things we can continue to do to improve our security that way. And also, IT is looking for, when a line goes down now for the computer, internet goes down, maybe there's an accident over in Holland someplace, ours is affected, we're looking into getting a direct line to the Perrysburg district so that doesn't happen, so we're not affected by something that takes place someplace else. But other than that, the notes again are pretty clear. And also, I just was thinking when I left the operation the other day, I know, Sue, you've said this a lot, but if you've been to Disneyland, a lot of things take place behind the scenes, but they have a tunnel they can go down into, and they're doing a lot of things from point A to point B. And our operations folks, it's amazing how to keep things running like one heartbeat here. All the things that they do to bring it together, for transportation, to cafeteria, to IT, to maintenance, to transportation. It's amazing how those department heads and the staffs that they have work together to make our school functioning daily. So we thank them a lot.
No disrespect, our new Lila, and I've forgotten her name. Has she started? Is she surviving? She's got a good mentor.
Oh, very good. Finance Committee, I don't know that I have anything else to add other than appreciate changing up the timing of how we're going to look at those assumptions for the 5-year forecast and giving the board a couple opportunities to ask questions and look at it and synthesize it. It's a lot of work to do, so appreciate you moving up that timeline. I don't know, Mr. Pullman, anything else to add? No. Okay, we're going to move on to the Curriculum Committee. We've Mrs. Eubank or Dr. Ruffert? Curriculum?
So we had a presentation, Mr. Schwartzmiller brought in our resident educator mentor. So there was lots of information about how we provide mentoring and RESA, resident educator, how to get our teachers through the program. And we also started discussing how ODE is making it a 2-year program, starting in 23. Am I correct? Right. But the next grads will be going into, so they're licensed when they graduate this year. They'll be doing 2-year instead of a 4-year resident educator. So that'll be interesting to see how that works as well.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of challenges.
We don't know if there's necessarily an advantage.
We do not see the advantage.
Right.
We have valued our 4-year program under Mr. Ricard's leadership.
Yeah.
We are making the change begrudgingly.
Right, and that's a state change, not a district. That's
Yeah.
mandated by the state.
Huh. That's curious. Probably to try and get more people through the program, or to encourage people to
Stay.
stay.
I think it's a stay.
I think for some districts, I think they struggle with the 4-year program. And, as Brent has indicated, we take it very seriously. We put a lot of thought into it. Mr. Ricard is an excellent teacher, and he does very well. And we really support the teachers in that process. And I know other districts don't have that kind of support, and it's more of a, we're just happy to have somebody, let's move on. And so I think they've complained about the length of time the students are in or new teachers are in the program. So I think this is kind of a little bit of give to those folks that let's just get going. And
Yeah, we'll see how it pans out, and what they're expected to do in 2 years versus 4 years. So I think there are other issues, obviously, regarding the profession and, not making it a 2-year program instead of a 4. We also talked about, some, additions, that we'll talk about next week, or next month, like talking about some AP additions, local graduation seals. And if you look at the notes, as always, there's lots of good things going on in Perrysburg schools, and Mr. Schwartzmiller trying to get them all bulleted to keep those to the forefront of what's going on. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question on that committee? I just happened to read through the notes, and so when they identify a problem in math, in a math classroom, like fractions, for example, so is that something they're working on then? Is that what this person comes in from Bowling Green and helps the staff try to figure out how to tackle that? Is that what that means?
I think the lesson study, Mr. Schwartzmiller, if you want to explain that.
So lesson study, we're getting teachers together, and they are actually creating lesson plans together, and then watching the designated person execute that lesson, and really critiquing how they're interacting, how they're challenging, but the richness is in the conversation. You get professionals talking about instruction, that's our bread and butter. But they're working on it together, observing it together, reflecting together. How do we tweak this? It's just an opportunity for people that are doing really, really well to ratchet it up and do even better.
So the end result will be student success because, yeah. Well, again, your committee, of all committees, this is amazing. Everything you read through there, everything that's taken place in the education of our schools. I've been on the board now 6 years, and I still am impressed with every committee I served on. And that's what makes me so impressed with this school and happy to serve as a board member of the school district. I'll shut up now. You continue, please.
But agreed with that. And we get to highlight and actually show what is going on in the district, through all the unfortunate noise we hear sometimes. The focus is on the students and what is being produced in Perrysburg. And this, every time I see this list, I think it was on legal paper the one time, and I'm like, this is just phenomenal, the things that are going on in the district.
I think Mr. Hostler's report at the beginning
Agreed.
bears witness to all the work that's being done in committees like Brent's and operations and all of that, so yeah.
Pupil services. We had, again, Dr. Reffert and Mr. Pullman, looks like you're pulling a little double duty.
Yeah.
I need to
He
make
took
up
my
for what I
place
missed.
this time, yeah.
So Mr. Pullman jumped in for Sue when she had another commitment, so we didn't have to reschedule, because once we set these dates, it's kind of hard to change. But it was a really, I was very impressed with the presentation that we had, and I'm going to hopefully say it right, Ukeru. I'm sure I butchered that. But it was just another opportunity to provide more resources and tools for our staff and to help our students be successful in the classroom. So while it's not something that we would traditionally use, obviously, in all classrooms, it's just another way to look to see how we can support our most vulnerable learners. And it was really interesting. And I think, Mr. Pullman, it was a great presentation, and just where it's coming from and understanding how some of our students struggle, and that this is a way for them to be successful in the classroom still. And obviously, when we talk about restraint and seclusion, that is not something we want to do, but sometimes you have to do it for the safety of our students, and this just gives them more a more positive way to deal with their concerns or struggles they have in the classroom. We talked about a lot of other things, and you can see all the notes in there. And again, lots of great things going on with all of our students in the district.
I would add with the student services and well-being that Perry Harris has had a lot of mentorship in every building. I think, Mr. Hostler, we've had 135 new families come in, and Perry has touched base with every one of them. And One of the things that they mentioned too was that there was 200 504 plans this year compared to, that's 40 more than the past. And there's more anxiety and social emotional issues that they're seeing. So again, I was really impressed by what things were presented at this particular meeting.
The last board committee is Communications Committee.
I was there.
There, Mrs. Eubank.
Yeah, I got my district dashboard in the
Yep,
mail
this should have been
today.
in your mailbox
Yeah.
today,
Yep.
and it's,
I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I did
Keep-
get it.
if you see something in the dashboard, for the way that it's organized, to ease of readability, to something that maybe you don't think needs to be in there, or something that you see is missing, please let us know so that we can get that information to Rachel, because the amount of thought that goes into one of these is mind-boggling, from placement to style and size and type of font to the coloring. Just the location of things. This thing is never really the same from one to the next, though they kind of, to the casual eye, might look very similar, but she's tweaking it all the time due to feedback. So go home, that's your homework assignment for tonight, boys and girls. Go home and read this through and see what you like and don't like, or what you would like us to be sure to let her know about. The other thing that we did was, we kind of talked about emergency messages. Due to the sensitivity of the topic, the discussion here is rather light, but maybe creating some sort of a generic push out to people to help them understand what it is that we as a district send out to people, and when there is any kind of an emergency. There's rules, there's expectations, there's things that we have to sit back and wait because the authorities are taking a step first. We've got to wait on them. There's a lot that goes into that decision that usually has to happen within 5 or 15 minutes. Yet that may not be the public perception. So we spent a lot of time talking about that, what that might look like to help the public understand why we did it this time, but we didn't do it that time, or why didn't we do it this way, and wouldn't that make more sense? Well, no, it wouldn't. And so I think that's something that Rachel and Tom are probably going to be working on. And if you haven't, please read the employee newsletters. A lot of Tom's report was in the employee newsletter, and Rachel's been putting those out now, and those are really kind of cool. I think that's a neat tool to send out to everybody in the district, that they can catch up on news amongst themselves and great things happening, and so it's kind of a fun thing to read through. So
I appreciate you pointing out that that's new, because when it came and I read it, I'm like, this is great. How many years have I missed this?
No, you're fine, Eric.
Yeah,
You're doing
good,
fine.
good,
You're just, that's
good.
all right.
I have a couple of comments, updates related to Penta. They got some events coming up, like Outstanding Alumni Dinner's November 10th, and we will have a Perrysburg alumni that will be recognized at that event, which is always great news. The Penta Scholarship Dinner is a nice culinary event over there, and a nice fundraiser is December 1st. Moving backwards, Perrysburg's Explore Penta Days is set for November 4th, so the chance for our resident students to go over and take a look at the programming over there. And then I guess the last thing I will mention is that their Culinary Connections is open for lunch again. It's always good, and I'll even offer to all my fellow board members and Even the administrators in here, if you ever want to grab a lunch, connect with me, maybe even I'll buy, so. It's good, but if you want to go, let me know and I'll get you the information, so.
You can sign up for their emails. I get their emails, and they let you know what day and what the
Menus
menu's going to
are,
be.
yeah. Yeah, good, yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome that that's back.
Yeah.
After, long delayed and really missed, so. Any other committee discussions?
At the meeting that we had for pupil services about the career development, the jack away with our coordinator of careers and community. And that's kicking in gear and moving pretty good with respect to business people meeting with her and things that we're trying to do. We talked about Pennant County and wanting to get our kids moving that way and providing them other than, not everybody's going to go to college. So there's got to be other careers that they could take. And that's really a big uptick that I noticed in that meeting that they're talking about. And it's happening. We're working on that.
Thank you.
We should get Mike Rowe here to
I
do
was
it.
just thinking that.
That'd be awesome. Talk about blowing the budget, Randy.
Thank you all for your updates, and as well as that additional work that nobody ever really sees, all that committee work that is important. So we're going to move into the consent agenda now. The consent agenda will cover items 10 through 14. So prior to discussion or questions, can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Dr.
Second.
Rufford, Ms. Larimer? And any questions or discussion about the items in the consent agenda?
I had a couple comments and questions. Under the board minutes, a name was spelled wrong. I went back and looked. It was spelled wrong in September, but Nicole is spelled wrong.
Okay, we'll get that corrected. Thank you.
I thought, is there two people? And then I thought, no, I know how her name's spelled. Okay, and then 14.1, 14.2, and 14.3, how many students does that cover? Do you know, Randy?
So 14.1 is one student. 14.2 is an agreement because we service the St. Rose. Auxiliary services are the public funds that flow into St. Rose, so that is almost like a pass-through of funds. So
We get, based on their student count, they get money from the state. We are the administrator of that fund, so it's a pass-through, and then we get a small administrative fee that we take from that.
So do you know how many students though, or?
there's 305, I think, students at St. Rose.
Okay.
So every student in every private school, every student who attends a private school, the state of Ohio provides a set dollar amount for that student. I think it was at one time, I think it's increased, but it was like $900 per pupil for auxiliary services. So every private school student, that school receives that amount. So as Randy said, we're the ones that, I guess, handle the funds or not, basically a pass-through or administer those funds.
These are required by law, right?
Yeah, there is, yes, and the state can't send the school directly.
Right.
So it comes to us, we have a special fund set up for them. They set their budget, they do purchase requisitions through our system. We pay those bills, and then and these funds go for 2 years. And then the last 2-year cycle just ended, so I filed a report with the state, said here's how much we spent. If they don't spend it all, it gets sent back.
Okay.
And what they don't spend. So we don't get, like I said, we get a 4%, we can take a 4% administrative fee, that's it, for handling those funds.
And in the document, if you have a moment, you can take a look to see where those funds are and how those funds are then used. So that is a breakdown that's attached.
I saw that. I just didn't say how many students. Do you know how many students then for I turned the page, sorry. 14.
Well, we actually don't know for sure.
Oh, okay.
That's an
share that with
estimate.
us.
Until we get our.
Until they tell you the numbers?
So we should see that in, we have not received a payment yet. When we get that first payment, that'll be based on actual head count.
Yeah, okay. Well, maybe when you get that information, just pass it on.
Well, I know in 14.8 that if we play Jeopardy, I know what a smensel is now. The fundraiser. I never, a smelly pencil. I didn't realize that.
It's a hot commodity.
Is it? Okay. I had to look that up.
What is it?
Smensel.
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 Smelly pencil.
Oh,
Did not
Smensel
know what a
sale.
smensel
Oh, okay,
was,
I
but
see.
it must be big.
Okay,
Always learn something being on the board.
that's right. I'm going to ask we call to the question. Roll call, please.
Dr. Reffert,
Yes.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank,
Yes.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. Okay, now it's an opportunity for board discussion of new agenda or new items. Okay. Seeing,
Just a quick reminder, I sent you all a text, but just a quick reminder that if you're going down to convention on that Monday, to see if you can't work into your schedule to go and watch our strings group perform, as they actually won a spot to be down there at the convention for us. So I think that's really cool.
Awesome.
it's a solid honor, again. Okay, we are now at our second opportunity for public participation. Again, I do not have the list with me, but look over and ask, is there anybody that would like to? Nobody is on the list, okay. So with that,
So moved?
a motion
Second.
to adjourn by Ms. Larimer and Dr. Reffert. And roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Dr. Reffert,
Yes.
Mr. Pullman, Mrs. Eubank.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you.